Well, hello, confirmands. I hope you are well. It is good to see you. We are continuing our march through the Small Catechism. This is the lesson for December 13th, 2023. It is lesson 10 of year 3, Small Catechism, 10 Commandments, the 7th Commandment. So we are on the second table of the law, the part of the law that talks about our relationship with one another. Remember, there's this expanding circle of influence or concern. That the fourth commandment, the first on the second table, is that we are to obey all those exercising proper authority. Honor your father and mother. Fifth commandment, don't murder. Sixth commandment, don't commit adultery. Seventh commandment has to do with our neighbor's property. You shall not steal. The announcements are the same as they are every week. For the first week of confirmation this year, everybody had their name on their papers. So that's a milestone. It's big. I mean, it's sort of a kindergarten accomplishment, but we did actually get it done. So I'm glad for you for that. We are in the season of Advent. We talked some about that on Wednesday. Remember that Advent is a penitential season, one of the 2 penitential seasons of the church year. It's a time to look back, to think about all the things that we have done amiss and to make amends for those things. And it's a time to look ahead, both to Jesus coming as the babe of Bethlehem, and to Jesus coming again in power and glory at the second return on the last day. So in the meantime, you and I are supposed to live holy lives. We're supposed to be holy in thought, word, and deed, and the commandments are part of that. The commandments, remember, they do some things for us. They do at least 2 and maybe 3 things. They for sure tell us how we're supposed to live. They for sure drive us to our knees as we realize that we're not able to even keep the simplest of them. And then maybe they help us to live better with God's Holy Spirit guiding us. There's not a lot of evidence for that, of course, that most of us continue to be something of a mess right up until the time where God calls our name and we move from this world to the next. But we could do better. We could do better, you and me. Maybe not righteous, actually, but we could do better. And so today, that's the spirit in which we go forward. The beginning of the phrase that pays, we'll start with 4 words. Good works do not. First 4 words. Good words do not. All right. The 7th commandment. You shall not steal. What is this? What does this mean? We are to fear and love God so that we neither take our neighbor's money or property, nor acquire them by using shoddy merchandise or crooked deals, but instead help them to improve and protect their property and income. Now, there's something we should say here. One of you in your questions said, why do all of the commandments have this we're to love and fear God part in it? Remember, that's not the commandment, right? That's Luther's explanation of the commandment in the Small Catechism. The commandment is, you shall not steal. I have it right there on the sheet. It's from Exodus 20, verse 15. Right, so on your sheets that I give you every week, the 7th commandment, or the commandment, is listed. And then there's that section, what is this, what does this mean? That's Luther. Luther is Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther is telling you what that commandment means. So there's the commandment, there's Luther's little explanation in the Small Catechism. There's my little video that I do with you that I talk about Luther's explanation. And then if you really want to do more, there is Luther's Large Catechism. The difference between the Small and the Large Catechism is that the Large Catechism is larger. But the Large Catechism has 7 or 8 pages of Luther talking about each of these commandments. It is absolutely accessible to you. You're not too young to read it. You're not too dumb to read it. It's easily accessible language. And so the Large Catechism is always available to you. You can get it online. You can either download it for free or you can look it up online and see Luther's Large Catechism. So the what is this mean, and then we are to fear and love God is not the commandment. It is Luther talking about the commandment. And remember, the fear and love God part is that we are aware that God loves us more than any being has ever, will ever, could ever love us. But we're also aware that God is not like us, that God is magnificent and enormous and powerful beyond anything we can imagine. And so, at the beginning I talked about swimming with an orca, with a killer whale or with a great white shark, that they may be very nice and very tame, right? And it's fun to swim with it. But you never forget that you're swimming with an orca or a great white shark. Or it's like having a tiger in your bedroom. Great, as long as it purrs and wants to be pet, but you are always aware that you got a tiger in your bedroom. And our relationship with God is something like that this is the truest, purest love that you'll ever experience. But God is not like your little brother that you can push around or ignore at your will or not pay attention to. God is a being of magnificence and power and purpose beyond anything. So we fear and love God. We're aware of the power of God. We're in awe of the power of God. And we love God because God first loved us. And that fear and love makes us want to keep this commandment. So that's where that language comes from. Just a reminder to everybody. All right? You shall not steal. We are to fear and love God so that we neither take our neighbor's money or property, nor acquire them by using shoddy merchandise or crooked deals, but instead help them to improve and protect their property and income. All right, so after your life and your spouse, the thing that's most precious to most of us is our property. And we are forbidden to try to get our neighbor's property away from him or to diminish it, to hurt our neighbor's property in any way, to vandalize it, to injure it, to reduce its value. All of that is forbidden, right? And so obviously this starts that we're not supposed to just steal, that we're not supposed to take stuff out of stores, we're not supposed to loot, we're not supposed to put stuff in our pocket that doesn't belong to us. But Luther thinks that that's so incredibly obvious that we don't need to talk very much about it, right? You knew that when you were 3 and someone took your Halloween candy. You hated that. Right? You didn't like it at all. You resented it. You knew that it was wrong. You also knew it was wrong when you went to Goodwill and stuck the little army guy in your pocket, right? And your mom made you go back and tell the people at Goodwill that you put the army guy in your pocket and you had to give it back to them and put it back on the shelf. Stealing is wrong. Don't take stuff that's not yours. So Luther says we don't need to spend much more time on it than that. Every 3-year-old understands this, and you understand it too. If it's not yours, don't take it. If it's not yours, help whoever owns it, protect it, and defend it. If you see someone else stealing, it is absolutely your job to get involved. You're supposed to help your neighbor keep their property. All right? So that's easy, right? You can live your whole life without putting another green army guy in your pocket at Goodwill. You can live your whole life without taking the 3-year-old's Halloween candy. You understand it. So no problem, commandment kept. We can end the video right here, right? Well, not so fast. First, we got to add some more words to the phrase that pays, right? Make a good person. So 4 more words. Make a good person. You can put a comma on there. It'll help you later. And now we're up to 8 words total. Okay. So Luther then says, that's the basics. But now let's unpack everything else that's involved in this commandment. Right? It's stealing when you take advantage of another person in a business dealing or in any exchange of money for goods or services. Right? I'm not talking here about honest profit. I'm not talking here about a reasonable markup. I'm not talking about value added. Right? If you buy the ingredients for a cake and you spend time making and decorating a cake, you are entitled for the compensation that's due you because of your skill, your time, your effort, your knowledge. No one expects you to sell the cake for the same money that you paid for the ingredients. But if you got someone who doesn't know what a cake should cost, they're new to the country, right? They're young, they're dumb, and you charge them 6 times the actual value of that cake, that's stealing. You're taking advantage of someone in a financial transaction. And just because you can get the money doesn't mean it's not stealing. When you damage someone's property or allow it to be damaged, it's stealing, right? If you vandalize something, if you spray paint something, if you break something, it's stealing, right? You go into a store, you pick up a bowl to look at it, you drop it, you got to go up to the front, you got to ask for the manager, you got to say, I broke this bowl. Now probably the manager's going to say, don't worry about it. Fine, don't worry about it. But if the manager says you owe me $19 for that bowl, you owe him $19 for the bowl, because you took something that belonged to someone else, and either accidentally or through carelessness, you cost that store $19. And so you got to make it right? Otherwise, it's stealing. This one is fun because it's got some old words in it. When you vex your employer, so vexing someone means to annoy them or to make them angry. When you vex your employer through laziness, carelessness, or spite. When you take a job and your employer says, I will pay you $12 an hour to do this job, you are required to work 60 minutes. Not 4 minutes, check your phone, not 6 minutes, spend 10 minutes in the bathroom, not 3 more minutes, go get a drink, another 4 minutes, check your phone. You're stealing from your employer. Now, your employer probably is a reasonable person and understands bathroom breaks. That's not a problem. But you're not sitting there on the throne with your phone for 9 minutes while you're on the clock, right? When you're on the clock, you should be working. And you understand this too. This is not complicated. If you were an employer, let's say you have a business raking leaves and washing windows in the fall, and you have some of your friends working for you, right? And you've bid this job. You are going to get paid by the homeowners for raking the leaves and washing the windows. You've offered your friends an hourly wage to do it, and a couple of them are working their tookuses off, and a couple of them are just standing around talking. You're not going to like that. To use the old word, you're going to be vexed because these people are stealing from you. That you're paying them an hourly wage, you're getting a flat rate from the homeowner, so if they burn up money by taking extra time, you're not going to get anything for all of your work setting it up. That's not right. These people who say that they're your friends are stealing from you. And in the same way, when you get a job, I mean, if you have a flat rate job, right? I had a lawn mowing business. It was the first thing I did when I was a kid to my first economic sort of move, right? It was flat rate, right? I got paid $6 to mow the whole lawn, sweep the sidewalks. The homeowner didn't care if I took 9 hours to do it. Didn't care, right? But, I learned pretty fast that the faster and harder I worked, the more money I could put in my pocket, the more homes I could service, the more lawns I could mow. Right? And I had a partner who was exactly the same way. And if either one of us had been just messing around, partnership would not have lasted. As it was, my friend and I were friends throughout elementary school, middle school, and high school. We went separate ways in college. I went to different colleges. But, it was a fast friendship. And one of the foundations of it was that neither one of us stole from the other. We were splitting the money. Both of us worked equally hard, right? So it doesn't matter if you're mad at your boss. You're not a slave. You're not an indentured servant. You don't have to stay there. If you're mad at your boss and you don't want to give good value for the money you're receiving, then you need to quit, right? You need to find somewhere else to be where you're not stealing from your boss. Careless work is the same thing. Right? If your boss is paying you to do something and you're too careless to do it well, and you get corrected and you still do it badly, and you get corrected and you still do it badly because you just don't care enough to fix it, to do it right, you're stealing. Most of us don't like to think of ourselves like that. I don't like to think of myself like that. I'm not telling you that I worked full out every hour of every job I ever worked, but I am ashamed that I didn't. I'm ashamed that I spent any time complaining against my employer, because my employer is offering me the chance for economic freedom. And I owe it to my employer to give fair value for the money given. And again, if you don't like the money, if you don't like the work environment, don't steal. Get out of there. And all you have to do is flip it around. That if you were the boss, and your employee was working with your attitude or your skill set or your inability to get things right, what would you think? And if you come to the conclusion that if someone was doing what I'm doing when I was the boss, I'd consider it theft, baby, you got a problem. And you got to fix that one of two ways. You either need to shape up or you need to get out, right? Don't steal. When we overcharge, it's stealing. We already talked some about that. But there's a real conversation that Christian business people should have about what it is that I'm able to charge for this that is not theft. That there's a line out there somewhere where it becomes theft. And you can manipulate the market, you can do artificial scarcity, right? That's not theft per se, right? If you could sell 4,000 purses for $50, but you decide to only make 400 of them, so you can sell them for $500 or $5,000, that's not theft, it's artificial scarcity. But there are some things that we do that we pump up the prices through some manipulation of foodstuffs. And suddenly the poor can't buy what they need because we've artificially inflated the prices of something that they need, right? That's theft. When we're careless or unreliable in our work, it's theft. It's stealing, right? If you're part of a process and your work product is slow or it's incomplete or you're unreliable and the people who are depending upon you have to go back and do your stuff or have to wait so that the ultimate employer has got a whole bunch of unproductive people because you're not pulling your weight, it's theft. Right? If you can't do the job, get training. If you won't do the job, knock it off or find a new job. Anytime we exploit, when we produce defective merchandise, if you're producing a product that you know is bad and you're charging good money for it, it's stealing. Right? If you're involved in trickery, sharp practices. Sharp practices mean it's an old kind of language again, where you're outsmarting the consumer. Instead of doing something that's good for the person who's buying your product or service, you're outsmarting them in some way. That you're selling them, half a bag of goods and a promise instead of a full bag of goods, right? Or any underhanded dealings. Anything that you're not proud of or anything you would resent if it was done to you, you shouldn't do. Anytime we exploit people, fleece them, victimize them, obviously, right? If you're taking advantage of someone in any way, your employer or your customer in any way, it's stealing. Right? You cheat on your taxes, it's stealing. You use a loophole that nobody knows about that's not quite legit, it's stealing. Now, if there's a legitimate deduction, if there's a legitimate way for you to shelter some of your income from taxes, fine. Right? You're under no obligation to pay more than you owe. You are required to pay everything you owe, even if your accountant says you can get away with it without doing it. Or anytime, and this is the hardest one, anytime we allow the poor to be burdened or crushed, we're stealing. If you're not defending people in their ability to have and to hold property, to have and to hold the things they need, it's stealing. That one's harder to get your head around, right? And so, talk to the people that you respect. Talk to moral people that you trust. Talk to your parents, your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles, people that you know to be honest, people of integrity. If you have a question, is this thing I'm wanting to do, is this way I'm wanting to do it? Is this appropriate, or is this putting an undue burden on the poor, or is this a sharp practice, or is this misdealing? Then you'll have your answer as to whether or not you're allowed to do it. All right, our phrase of pay so far, we got 8 words in the bank, right? Now we're going to add another 4, so we'll be up to 12. If you're not up to 12 after this 4, then you need to go back. But a good person, right? So now we're up to 12 words. So I said at the beginning that the large catechism is an expansion of the small catechism, right? So in the small catechism, it's just this. We're to fear and love God so that we neither take our neighbor's money or property, nor acquire them by using shoddy merchandise or crooked deals, but instead help them to improve and protect their property and income. All right? You keep that, you've kept the commandment. But if you have questions, you talk to someone like me, you talk to the family, the cloud of witnesses, you talk to fellow Christians, you go to the large catechism, which I have mentioned you can get for free online. So I have 3 quotes here from the large catechism that might flesh it out a little bit better, that might help you think about this a little more clearly. Luther says, "Thievery is, in short, the most common craft and largest trade union on earth." That if you add up all these things we've talked about, the ways that you can take advantage of your employer or your customers or the poor in your midst or your neighbor, baby, everybody's doing this, right? To a lesser extent, you and me than some, but you and I aren't perfect here, right? We haven't in all cases helped our neighbor to protect everything that belongs to our neighbor. We haven't in every transaction thought what's best for the person with whom we're doing the transaction, right? So Luther says you add all that up, this is the biggest show in the world. That most everybody is stealing. But it shouldn't be so for you and me, because we're followers of Jesus. Jesus died for us. Jesus died that we might be his. Jesus calls us to live like him, to talk like him, to act like him. Second quote from the Large Catechism, "Let everyone know then that he is duty-bound at the risk of God's displeasure to do no harm to his neighbor, to take no advantage of him in business, and never, in any kind of transaction, to deal unreliably or underhandedly with him. More than that, he is faithfully to protect his neighbor's property and to look after and further his interests, especially if he is paid or otherwise remunerated for such services." Now don't let the male pronouns there trip you up. Remember, Luther thought that women were people too. He was the first guy to say that girls should be educated. He said out loud and proud that women have souls and should be in every respect treated the same as men. Right? So don't let the male pronouns there fool you. This is for everybody. Right? That at the risk of God's displeasure, at the risk of making God angry, you and I are called to do no harm to our neighbor, to take no advantage of our neighbor, or to deal unreliably or underhandedly with our neighbor. Instead, we're supposed to do exactly the opposite. We're supposed to protect our neighbor's property. We're supposed to look after our neighbor's interests, make sure that our neighbor gets everything that he or she has coming to him or her. And this is especially true if we're being paid. Right? You have an obligation to protect your boss's interests. You have an obligation to protect your boss's reputation. And if you can't do it, shape up or get out. Right? If you need to ask for more training, ask for more training. If you still can't do the job, you're stealing. Third, we are commanded to promote our neighbor's property interests, improve his situation, and if he is in need, be he friend or foe, share with him and lend to him. That's huge. Whether you like this person or not, whether you like or despise your boss, whether you like or despise your clients or your customers, you are commanded to work in their good interest, to promote their interests, to help them get ahead. You're not trying to take from them. You're not trying to build some empire on the backs of the people that you've misled, that you've swindled, that you've taken from, right? And even people you dislike, you are supposed to serve in this way. And our example here is God, who makes it rain on the just and the unjust, who makes the sun shine on the good and on the evil. That this is about me. This is about you. This is about how we act. People will laugh at us. People will make fun of us. People will think this is foolishness, right? But Jesus commands it. God commands it and expects it. And you and I are warned that as God's children, as part of God's family, we are responsible to the family rules, not to the world's rules. 3 more words. What does that take us to? 15 total. Does good works. Does good works. Okay. There's a Bible verse that I want you to think about a long, long time, right? You lay in your bed, you can't get to sleep, right? Think about this. He who is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his deed. That when you're kind to the poor, when you give them their due, when you help them protect the little they have, when you don't take from them in any way, when you don't let anyone else misuse them or take from them the things that they need to live, when you defend and protect their interests, when you make sure that they have food and housing and clothes and that's not taken from them by crazy rent schemes or by reallocation of food resources that makes food more expensive for them, right? Whenever you stand with the poor, right, God sees, and God will repay you for those deeds, right? So again, Luther wants us to remember that when you care for the poor, God will give you 100 times more than you could possibly scrape together by irresponsible conduct, by unjust dealings, by stealing from the poor. Last two words of the phrase that pays, Martin Luther. So I think that takes us up to 17, right? 12 plus 3 plus 2, 17 total words. All right, there's a Bible story to think about. You can read it in Joshua chapter 7. Let me give you the Cliff Notes version of that. Do you know what Cliff Notes are anymore? Someone can ask about it if you don't. So you know the story about how Joshua and Israel conquered Jericho, right? The marching around the walls 7 times, blowing the trumpets, the walls fell down. One of the things you might have forgotten is that there was a command given to the people of Israel by God through Joshua. When you go into Jericho, all of the plunder belongs to the Lord. The Lord's going to give you this city. You're not going to have to do anything to take it, right? The walls are going to fall down. You're going to be victorious. So all of the plunder, the gold, the silver, the fancy cloth, the iron, all that belongs to the Lord should go into the treasury of the tabernacle. And everyone said, yep-a-dup, that's exactly what we'll do, right? So they marched around Jericho, they blew the trumpets, the walls fell down, right? And for the most part, the people obeyed that command, and they didn't take a cut personally of the gold, the silver, the fine cloth, the iron, the plunder, whatever, right? But one guy did. His name is Achan, right? And he stole from the Lord. This is God's stuff, and Achan took it. So nobody knew. Achan got away with it, right? He had some silver, he had some fancy cloth, he had some gold. He buried a hole under his tent, and he hid it there. So the next city that the Israelites had to deal with was a little town called Ai, and the spies went out and they came back to Joshua and they said, we do not need the whole army for this place. It is, it's like invading Rashel. It's nothing, right? Send a small group of bands and we can wrap up Ai real fast. So Joshua sent a small group of guys, and Ai kicked their butts. Right? That we had loss of life on the Israeli side. They got chased away. They got humiliated. And the hearts of all the people just melted in them, that they couldn't even take on a little town like Rashel. How are they going to take over this whole country? And they were terrified, and again they wanted to turn their back and go back across the Jordan where it was safe. And Joshua prayed to God, what's going on? You said you'd be with us, you brought us here. People are going to see that a little flea speck of a town could kick our butts. This isn't good for your reputation. It's not good for our reputation. Suddenly we're going to have enemies everywhere wanting to pick us off. And God said, yeah, but I helped you and one of you stole from me. And Joshua said, what now? And God said, one of you stole from me. No, I'm not helping you anymore. So Joshua went through a process and he figured it out that, he got it down to Achan. And he said, now tell the truth. Did you steal from the Lord? And Achan said, yeah, I did. A little silver, a little gold. I mean, it's not really hurting anything. Right? It's under my tent. And Joshua said, well, not really hurting anything. Tell that to the widows and the orphans of the guys that we lost in the battle with Ai. Now, bring it here. So, this was a brutal time when God was teaching really hard lessons about you will obey me. Right? They took Achan and they took the silver and the gold and the cloth that they found under his tent, and they took his family and his livestock and his kids, and they stoned him all to death. They burned everything. They piled rocks high on it, and it was a way to show all Israel that when God gives a command, you can't just ignore it. You can't substitute your sensibilities for God's sensibilities. And you think people looking at that big pile of rocks didn't remember for a good long time? So it's unbelievably harsh, right? Unbelievably harsh. But it's a kindness to everyone else, that they know that God is serious, that their being blessed by God is dependent upon them obeying God. And it's a clear way of saying that God is serious about these commandments. So, you think about that. We can talk about that. Again, the 7th commandment, you shall not steal. We are to fear and love God so that we neither take our neighbor's money or property, nor acquire them by using shoddy merchandise or crooked deals, but instead help them to improve and protect their property and their income. All right, again, I'm going to put dates on these next few ones because they're going to go up, over the break, and you need to know which one you're looking at. This is the lesson for December 13th. All right, you take care of yourself. I will see you on Wednesday the 13th, in person, I hope, or online if you need. And I do wish you well. God bless. Bye-bye.